Hi everyone! We hope you're having an amazing time and welcome to our talk Thriving Through Identity Rethinking Festivals for Latin America. Here in this talk, we'll be talking about the positive impact that game dev events have in the Latin industry, and we also want to propose to you our approach to bring those opportunities to Latin America. But first, we would like to introduce ourselves. So, Mateo, if you'll please do me the honors.
Hello everyone, my name is Mateo Alaiza. I am CEO of Hermanos Magia. I've been working in the video game industry for about 10 years now. I'm also a game director at Leap Game Studios, and I have focused my work in doing video games that have a special focus on culture, talking about subjects like depression, death, or cultural heritage. Thank you for inviting me, our good friends from Latins in Gaming. Muchas gracias por invitarme.
And hi again, my name is Sul Sanchez. I'm the CCO at Summer Pixel, an indie studio based in Peru and developers of the narrative game Night Reverie. I'm also co-founder and president of FemDev Peru, which is now in a process to be a non-lucrative organization where we promote the participation and visibility of Peruvian and Latin American women in the industry. We make game jams, workshops, streams, and so much more for this purpose. So, in summary, we are both two indie devs very passionate about advocating for our Peruvian culture in the industry. And so please, if you feel interested in talking to us more after this talk, or you want to support our work, please feel free to contact us. Our contact info is in the presentation. Now, getting into the topic of today, we first need to take a look of the challenges of the Latin American industry so we can see how game dev events have a big impact in our industry and why do we believe that they are key to overcome these challenges. Sadly, in most areas of Latin America, there's this terrible perception that video games are immature interests and they are an unrealistic professional path. This tends to happen because our industry is still very small. I think the biggest studio in Peru has less than 60 people, and most of our studios are made of indie teams that less of 5 people. And sometimes even these teams have full-time or part-time jobs outside of what it's making games because they need, to have the money to afford making games on their free time. This is why many people don't know that we make games. People still in our country see games as, a weird kind of hobby or, something that it's made outside of Latin America, like United States, Japan, and so on. So our struggle, it's not only that we need to show the rest of the world like, hey, we do make games, this is what we're doing right now. It's also that we need to work that in our own local communities and in the government. Which brings us to our next challenge, which is, economy. How do we get others to support what we do if they don't know about us? This is a very important topic because finding funding and investment opportunities is key to us developers. Not many of our governments give us the support or the tools we need, and that plus the low income realities that most of us in our region have to overcome constitute one of the main barriers to enter the video game industry. As I mentioned before, even if you do have a part-time or full-time job aside from making games, the currency exchange from our local currency to dollars or euros, to pay game submissions, to travel to international events, or just, even paying to submit your game on Steam or licensing programs, it comes with a very high cost. Every time we need to pay for any of these services, we need to consider that the price it's gonna be multiplied by 4 or even a higher number depending on where you live or where you come from. And yeah, this is definitely a huge disadvantage because, again, if we don't have the financial support and if we cannot get it from our own resources, then not many people can make games in Latin America. Because, at the end of the month, we want to eat, right? And finally, but not least, because this is a very important thing, is the language barrier. We're right now talking to you in English, but in Latin America, our main language is either Spanish or Portuguese, again, depending on where you come from. And when it comes to, content, tutorials, game dev talks, documentations, and so on, it all comes in English. So this is a huge disadvantage because many of us do not have the opportunities nor the accessible resources to learn or practice uh, this language. And if you're an indie dev and you want to submit your game, or you want to submit a talk, or if you want to talk to a publisher or even other devs, you need to talk in English. Sadly, this is not, an optional thing. It's a requirement. And maybe you're thinking that it might be a contradiction that, we're making this talk in English and it might not be accessible for our local communities. But we decided that to do this talk, like this talk is not only for us Latinos, but it's for everyone. Everyone that is willing to also make a difference in the industry. So you can learn about our industry, our reality, and hopefully join the movement that we want to share with you today. Now, we've seen the disadvantages uh, of what we are having in the Latin industry. So, how game dev events come here to fight all these things that we are telling you here right now is that game dev events bring such a good opportunity, such amazing spaces for us to have. First, bringing people together, which, the fancy way to say would be networking. But I prefer to say it like it brings us together because it's more human, it's more friendly. At the end of the day, we want more friends in the industry. We want to know more about others one's experiences because we know my experiences. Even if I am Peruvian, you are also Peruvian, or maybe are from other part of the world, like your experience will totally different from mine, so I'll definitely be able to learn a lot from you, and hopefully you will want to learn a bit from me too. So, meeting other devs, making new friends in the industry, it's a very an amazing experience. And it's not a coincidence that this event it's called Unidos for a reason. We're all here united, to know about each other, learn about each other, and hopefully support each other too. And this is very amazing and important because it also comes with the second um, big advantage or positive things that I think the game dev events have in the industry, which is access to better opportunities. This is why a lot of people talk even about networking, because you never know who you're gonna meet, and then maybe gonna that will open you doors to other possibilities and other amazing things. And not only with talking to devs, or talking to other people that are interested in the industry or whatsoever, but also especially for indie devs, getting to these events and meet personally with publishers, it's like the best experience because, again, since you know we need the money to make games, and sometimes many teams and very talented teams don't have the resources, uh, opportunities like this to meet to publishers that are willing to support our work, it's key for the games to be made. And and going to events like GDC or Gamescom, it's a very huge opportunity for that, and definitely will be a very good approach for the Latino studios to come and apply to these funding opportunities. And Last, but definitely also not least, raising awareness. Um, if you've gone to one event, especially if it's not in your country, these game dev events, and you've talked to people, they might not know about you, know your work, but not only that, they don't might know about your country and less of all your local industry. So when you go to these events, you represent your country. You're not only showing your talent, and your work, but it's you are also showing like, hey, my country makes games. Hey, this is what we're doing. If you want to know about more about us, please contact me. Um, that's an amazing thing because that also like opens the mind of many people that might not know that we exist, nor the things that we can come and offer. But now, when we've been talking about the game dev events, and you've probably been thinking, you know, GDC, Gamescom, Indicate, PAX, Tokyo Game Show, all these big events that have something in common, which is they are all outside Latin America. And as we talked before, this is a huge deal breaker, not only because, the language barrier, but, buying airplane tickets, buying the tickets for the event, the accommodations, the food, etc. All the exchange currency, like way too high for us to pay it. So, you know, from the list, for example, me, I've only gone to GDC. I've had the luck to, I've gone twice to this event, which is already like a lot for us Latin Americans. Like, say, like I've gone twice, like that's a huge record. And to be honest with you, the first time I went was because I won half a scholarship and I could afford to pay the rest of the trip. And the second one was because Latinos in Gaming was uh, very kind to sponsor my trip and also my coworkers because we were doing a panel in this year's EDC. But that's the only two reasons like I could afford going to these events. But there are just so many scholarships that one can apply. There are so many opportunities that you can go to, right? And how can we do, to make more people from Latin America experience these amazing events? Because as we've seen before, we've seen all the list of advantages, and there probably are more advantages, but those are the ones that uh, they want to show the most because we think those are the most important ones. So how can we do that for more people? And it will be amazing that they can all offer us scholarships and they can all offer us these opportunities, but that's not always the case. So and definitely that's not the approach we're trying to give today. Because why we focus on going to these events but not having these events coming to us, right? And actually, Latam has bring these spaces. These are two examples of those efforts. Big Festival in Brazil started in 2012, and Expo Eva in Argentina, which started in 2003. They are the most biggest events here in Latin America, which are focusedly they're focused primarily on devs, on building dev community, a space for networking, to meet publishers as well, which are the funding opportunities that we definitely like to have. But what about the rest of Latin America? What about Peru? What about Bolivia? What about Chile? We know that there are some other events in local, but very small events in Colombia, and probably in other parts of the industry. Like probably we have fair, but like other events, but they are very very small, and maybe you haven't even uh, heard of Big Festival and Expo Eva, which are the biggest ones. So how can we do this? Because Latin America has so much to show, so much to offer. Like we have the talent, we have the creativity, we have the games, like we're doing them despite all the challenges, despite all the disadvantages. We're making it, we're doing it, and we want to show it. But how? How can we compete with the big events? How can we create these spaces for our local industry and compete with international or even bigger events that already have years of experience and a well known name?
Thank you, Sol, for your part in this talk. Now I will take part in the second half of the talk. And I want to start with a very simple idea um, that I think is very important concerning the condition of our events in Latin America compared to the ones that are the biggest in the world. So, first of all, the best way to be different when you're little is not to follow the current of what it's already done. We may feel small, but that's because we compare ourselves to organizations we're not yet part of, and maybe will never be. Let's face it. And actually, realizing this is not bad. On the opposite, we believe it's great because it helps to act towards diversity. So, sorry. So, our cultural wealth is as great as the most important global events that already exist. It's like a raw mineral that hides a gem. Um, and thinking in how to make an organization is not only an exercise that requires organizing a social group, but also doing critical thinking about our identity and history in order to make something that is unique and that has true meaning today. I think this is very important because many of the organizations that already exist in Latin America tend to look upon the biggest ones that are in countries like in the US or in Europe, but we are just replicating what they do, and we will never be able to compete against them if we do that. Let me explain about it. And so, using um, critical thinking and reflecting on how we do things today and what things do we have now as part of our cultural heritage, it's a rich exercise that can make us create new ways of doing things with traditions that no one has. And it's obvious that this sounds hard, but we believe that we all have a great element that helps enormously in the process, and is the traditions that we have. The old ones, but also the new ones. And they are definitely key. Many people can say, for example, that money, well, if you have more money or more budget, you can do more things. And that's true, you can do great things with money, but you cannot recreate our other country or the big ones as good as we do our own cultural traditions. And that's interesting because, in a way, the tradition is not only something that comes from history or the past, but actually it's something that happens in the present, and it is inscribed on how we see the world and how we relate to it. In a way, we can think of cultural traditions as social technologies, and every country, province, and town has their own. The model of events in Latin America aims to follow a structure that is seen in all the most important events in the world, like Gamescom or GDC. How can we compete against these circumstances? Why is it important to do it even so? If we look at the biggest gaming countries in the world, we will see how they tend to all have a common language in how the events are made and presented to the people. And this is because they are competing to be a maximum referent to the world industry. But we also should be aware that this condition puts aside the possibility to explore and enforce a local identity. And this, my friends, is where we come in. For us, the key is to rely on references and cultural traditions, as I said before. but not only because they refer to wealth and tradition of the country's historical past, but because these traditions have two key elements. The way each country, region, and social group has learned to create their own way of feeling and living determines many possibilities of how we approach life and what different experiences we create for it. Experiences we only know about, and maybe we can use them to create a new way to relate to video games too. The second reason is it is interesting to think of these legacies and forms as social technologies since they lead us to different ways of bonding and redefining new cultural products that can relate to innovate and show new ways to create, think, and especially gather and relate today with the world of video games. Let's think for a minute how if you go to another country they have social traditions that are very different from the ones that we have and how hard it is to change them. That difficult element that is inscribed in every social interaction is the richness of every country's identity because it helps to take you out from your comfort zone and relate and see the world with rich eyes but from a different point of view and perspective. And this helps us to think how we should be doing video games and how we could be showing them to the world that we haven't think of yet. Following the examples and guidelines that the biggest events are doing their job limits our ability to do something new because we rely on thinking to replicate them as a universal example. We believe that this is something that happens actually in many countries in Latin America, and we should be doing something about it because we have much more to offer than that. Let's face it, replicating events in a much smaller scale, it's not necessarily going to bring the eye or the interest of foreign developers or studios. We are many countries and definitely some will be put aside. This is, of course, if all are offering the same type of experience. And experiences not only happen in games, happen in the ways we relate in these events too. This approach for us is a way of positioning towards the industry so that the value of each country in Latin American region can assume a stronger viewpoint of how to invite people around the world to participate in an experience that maybe is not going to be the biggest, but will have something unique worth see and take part at least once. This helps to bring developers or studios that are important that they haven't experienced what we can give to them. The organizations that already exist and participate in the video game industry in Latin America are small compared to the largest on the planet. And each organization has its own problems. So, mainly, the games that are developed respond to the margins that may be inscribed in the market, but there is a tendency to always give a place of representation, voice, and identity to what is produced in games. This is a strong reason, and for wide events we organize for our countries must enforce that condition and enhance it even more. We should be asking ourselves why we give more of the same. Are we the same? We want to be part of it, but we are part of it in the same way others. One part of us, yes, and the other should be different. We should be part, giving something new to that part too. New ways to relate to the world of video games should not be enjoyed or thought of from the comfort of a home only. They are also a pathway for our cultural heritage to assume them and lead them to be carried off in other ways that no one knows in the world but us. In Peru, we have a small industry and we would love to be a benchmark for Latin America and the rest of the world. What would make others notice us if we don't even have the years of tradition or money to reach them? I am not talking about the US or any European country. I'm also referring to the events in the region that already exist. Some of them have 5 years, some others have 10, some others have only 1 or 2 years existing. So, how can we compete even with each other? If we all are trying to only create, if we are only creating one space to show. We have collected the tradition of the yunza in Peru, which is a dance around a tree that is loaded with gifts and people play music around it. It is practiced with different formats across the whole country, going to the jungles of the Amazonas, to the highlands of the Andes, to the desert in the coast. For us, this is an example, just an example of what we are talking today, of how a symbolic act converses with the possibility of how we give space and place to a medium as new as video games to insert itself and establish a dialogue in which the historical tradition of the country comes, so it can renew it in new ways and formats. It's definitely going to be a weird mixture for all of us, but it's going to be much more than that. More ways to show how you can be different experiences in how we show, give, sing, and play. How would be a small international event in the industry that mixes a Brazilian carnival with a video game showcase, or a Palenque video game contest in Colombia, or the Yunza dance in Peru? And I'm just mentioning three examples from Peru, Colombia, and Brazil. What about the other countries? I would love to travel to every single country and every single event to only have at least once an experience that enforces and puts video games in a dialogue with our traditional heritage, not the historical one, but the one that we're making today as a practice and as a symbolic experience that gives us meaning, that not only tries to enforce entertainment or someone that buys a stuff, but also that converses with the culture. Thinking with culture and its historical tradition definitely, for us, opens the door for video games to grow as a social experience that converses with other media, that enriches the way we approach the different paths we have to take to transit this medium. The mechanical variety that the video game world offers is also a sample of how rich this world is and what is offering right now to the people around the globe. Changing the conditions of how things are done can be a challenge, but given that there is little promotion to culture, especially in Latin America and in every country, and us in Peru, we have a special problem there, it is an enormous opportunity to use it as a new baseline. So, we also believe that this type of approach sends a strong message for the communities outside our countries. They will be curious to see and participate in these small practices, simply because they will be completely new. And inside of our countries, it also enforces the approach that developers are having to their own projects, helping to work more with the interesting subjects and rich thematics that we only know of, and we should be sharing more to the video game world community. People should be more aware of them, and maybe, one day we'll see them in the big events too. Of course, we'll know they will never be as we know how to do them. Let's never forget that there is a big tendency in our region to see the industry as a tool for entertainment, and it's very rarely seen as an agent of culture. In the short term, the video game events that gather our national and international communities are the ways to have a gathering, but in the long term, are setting the baseline of how each country articulates his identity and voice with his own means. This is a big responsibility that we should be aware of and also claim or even better generate it in our localities. Finally, we want to share that alongside Sol and other friends, we have created the Junsa Game Festival, a small festival in Peru for video games in the region that not only will have showcases, talks, and awards, but also gifts from a digital tree and many other activities with a unique and local viewpoint. This is our way of putting this practice today. So, thank you very much.
Thanks everyone for listening. We hope we have inspired you here today. And if you want to keep hearing from us or know a bit more about us, what we do, support our work, please feel free to contact us. Our contact info is in the presentation. You can find us on Twitter or LinkedIn and our emails. And also, we definitely want you to welcome you to the Yunsa Games Festival. Please consider following us for more news. If it's not yet released, we'll be opening submissions for games. So please, you're definitely encouraged to submit your game. We would love to see your talent from all around the world. And and again, we wouldn't be able to do this without the help of Latinos in gaming. So thank you a lot, Latinos, for your support and giving us this space to talk about the things that matter to us. So yes, please, if you haven't heard yet, I think there's a link to the donation page, so please consider donating to this amazing community that is helping so much Latino industry. So yes, I think they're gonna put it maybe here or on the chat, and if it's not, go Google it. It's probably on their webpage, and if you can, please donate. And if you can donate, then please retweet or post about it because every help counts, and definitely it means a lot to us. So yeah. Welcome to the Yunsa Games Festival, and we hope to see you soon. Bye.